So, welcome, welcome, welcome. We are back to Love Us Anyway. I am your host, Fantasia, and super glad you're here with us. And today's topic is one I believe we could all benefit from, being precise with our words. And so, our words carry power, and when we use them with clarity and care, they can bring healing, not harm. And guess what? I have an amazing person with me today, the amazing Donna Ray. Hey, Donna.
Hi, I'm here. Yes, it's great to be here with you, Fantasia, and for this topic. So I'm ready.
You ready? All in. And you're someone I know that knows a thing or two about intentional communication. And I mean, we're a work in progress, right? So we work on this as a daily thing and we don't always get it right, but we do have some helpful suggestions and tips. So I'm super excited to be here alongside you and for this conversation as well. Yeah, our words are powerful and sacred, and how we use them makes a
Mhm.
big, big difference. So, just starting out, what does being precise with your words mean to you?
Well, the first thing that situation that comes to mind is being a facilitator
Mhm.
or presenting information
Mhm.
and being precise with what I'm sharing or explaining.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I get excited, sometimes I'm distracted, and then I can hear myself over explaining or using terms that are familiar to me, but not to the people in the audience.
Mhm.
And I can see that expression on their face that it's not clicking, it's not gelling.
Yeah.
So that's the first situation that comes to mind. And second is then how that I am responsible for my words.
Mhm.
I am what comes out of my mouth. And so I'm so glad that we're talking about that
Yeah.
because I'm learning to slow down, to be present, and to speak to what I want people to know or to
Yeah.
hear.
That's good. That's good. Speaking to facilitation and teaching, and then also just general communication strategies and techniques on, um, like you mentioned body languages because you notice, oh, everybody's kind of the facial expressions appear confused, or when you mention about oversharing or talking. I tend to do that myself too. I don't know if that's the teacher in us or not, but I know that like I like to repeat myself for clarity, just to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. And sometimes I guess that could come across a little um redundant or whatever. But it's also, like you said, about slowing down enough to speak with intention, saying what you mean, um, and in like regular conversations, not just reacting. And it's also about checking in with yourself before you speak. My mom used to always tell me when I was younger, she would be like, you need to think before you speak. And I think I've said this to you before personally, but I would be like, I did think about it. That's why I said it. And she's like, and I didn't realize it until I got older that that's not what she meant. She just meant that you can't just blurt anything out. You might want to focus in on what you're saying, how you're saying it, what your intention is behind it. So processing it and thinking and not just blurting out the next thing. And so now, in hindsight, brings me to a mindfulness technique that I use often and that you mentioned, pausing, right? Just like before you speak, take a deep breath and ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? The one moment of awareness can change everything. And that goes into facilitation and just our normal day-to-day conversations too. Um, so yeah, that's what's coming up for me right now. And just wondering, Donna, talking about sometimes, we've gotten it wrong because we've all been there. Maybe we are too vague or too blunt or I don't know. So you want to share a time that maybe you were one of those ways or something else and how you handled it?
Yes, and this is maybe the example that's coming up is something in my personal life. And though I did take a moment to craft the message, um, and I did send it, and in hindsight, it felt cold. And so since then, I've been playing in my mind how I might say it differently or text it differently,
Mm,
um, where it was more heartfelt.
mm,
So I tend to, of course, it depends on the situation, tend to be a little bit more reserved
mhm,
and less emotional. But
mm,
then I think there are situations when I do want to lead with my heart because I want to have that warmth. I want to preserve the relationship. So I want to also sprinkle that in
mhm,
because that's important to me also. To and so another situation comes to mind, especially like with my mom and someone that's older. Some of the language, some of the words I use, or even um, some of the intention doesn't always translate, and it seems rude or disrespectful.
mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, how can I be more clear
Right.
and more loving?
Yeah.
So it really is on me to slow down,
Mhm,
make eye contact, and speak with love, right? Or keep that in the forefront of my mind when I'm talking instead of just pushing through on what I need to get done or what we need to decide on. What's
mhm.
important is the connection.
Right. Yeah. I love that your transparency and the fact that you spoke to leaning in and leaning in more to love, like speaking with love, um, because that's important. It comes off a little bit more supportive versus like an attack or whatever the case may be, or somebody putting their guard up because they're not feeling like they're part of the conversation based on how we're communicating with them. Um, and I've been in, some spaces like that too. And I try to be intentional about what I say and how I say it and the words that I use. Um, and sometimes I we want to, sometimes I don't know about the listeners in, but sometimes you may have been in a space where you felt like people should have known what you meant, whether or not through text or just regular conversation, and they really didn't, right? That and in those instances where I've been a part of that, like why isn't this clear? Why doesn't this make sense for you like it makes sense for me? And I'm sure other people have been on the receiving end of that. And what that taught me is to use clear language, especially when emotions are involved. Um, One thing that helps me is using I statements. So, like, instead of saying, you never listen to me, I try and I make sure I try to notice when I'm using those yous and try to
Mm.
convert it and or reframe it in the process or whatever, or in the moment. And instead of saying, you never listen to me, more like, I feel unheard when I'm talking and I don't see eye contact or engagement. And I know for me, eye contact is important. Like, I feel like people, in order for me to feel like you're paying attention, even if you're not listening, I feel like I want you to look at me when you're speaking to me or when I'm speaking to you. Uh, and sometimes somebody could look at you and not hear a word that you say. But for me, I feel a little bit more comfortable when somebody's engaged in that way. So making eye contact. But again, I try to reframe my verbiage if I notice that I'm not using those I statements. And especially because you can kind of see people cringe up a little bit or get a little defensive, and you're like, okay, All right, so you just told them what they're doing. How about telling them how you feel about what it is that they're what's happening in the moment, you know?
And
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
and that's a skill, right? It's just something that we get the opportunity to keep practicing because we're always in communication. We're always talking or sharing or vibing with someone,
Mm-hmm.
always. And it makes me think about when we were together just last month in April,
Mm-hmm.
why it was so beautiful to me because being with you, I feel so comfortable. I feel so relaxed. I feel like I can just be myself. So if I said something that might have been off color or off putting, it's something about just the way we're able to share with one another that I can say, oh, let me try that a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Versus many other people in my life, I feel like I put my foot in my mouth all the time and I'm always berating myself. And now I have to
Mm-hmm.
apologize. And I too want to be less defensive. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody could say, you did this and then you did that, blah, blah, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's not really me.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of let my guard down, even when I hear some of those triggering words that bring up a bunch of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to also be less defensive. And I know that I have control over that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm with people who it's easy to be with versus people who are more difficult to be with,
Mm-hmm.
I'm still in control of all of that. And so I'm just always practicing. I'm always and don't mean practice like in an academic way, but
Right.
it's always in progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
I may have gotten it right or it was easier this time versus the last time. And so
Right.
I want to kind of just take up more space in my
Mm.
life. So that means that I want to be more clear. I want to be more loving. I want to be more intentional. I want to be with people in a way that my life, their life, the community's life expands.
Yeah. I love that. Taking up more spaces and being intentional and loving on one another a little bit more. I love, love, love that. And yeah, those three things, right? I love this those three things. And even as our time is kind of wrapping up just a bit, just offering our listeners some mindful communication practices that they can start today. Matter of fact, right now, or the next conversation that you have, or whatever. So just breathing before you speak. And I heard Donna say, and I said it as well, pausing, right? And then listening with intention to understand, not just to respond. And also speak from your needs and feelings and not blame or assumption, right? Um, there's another thing to mirror what someone says to make sure they or make sure you understand for clarity. I always, just for clarity or for clarification. So you said this thing, or like what I hear you saying is that right? And that alone can prevent a lot of confusion too around a lot of different things when it comes to communicating with folks, because then they'll be like, oh no, that's not what I meant, or that's not what I said. Oh, okay. So let's have some dialogue around that then, because that's the way that I took it based on what, I heard you say, right?
That is spot on. That
Yeah.
first one, just breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take a moment for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And just wrapping up, we want to remind everybody that communication is not just about being heard. It's about creating space, safe space, with love and intention for mutual understanding. And so love requires clarity and grace and flexibility. And so that's where we're going to land with today. And I just love the focus, the fact that even this podcast is called Love Us Anyway. So even in the difficult times of communicating with other people, love me anyway, love you anyway, love us anyway. We thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Donna, you want to send them off with anything?
It's a pleasure. Gratitude
Yeah,
for the opportunity to share, to continue to nourish, you and I and the community. So
yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, friend. So, for our viewing folks or just those listening, family, take a moment today to breathe, pause before you speak, practice presence, and always, always, always choose love. Choose love at the center of everything. We love you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, later.